My fellow prophecy student, greetings. You will recall in my previous video, National Sunday Law, the Unknown Agenda, how I've made a point that a national Sunday law in the future will be very different from the kind of Sunday legislations we are seeing today. What I've actually pointed out is the fact that the Sunday law agenda was designed to be implemented in two stages. The first stage of the agenda is merely to preserve the present Sunday keeping tradition. When you hear various church leaders calling for laws in favor of Sunday keeping, it is just to protect its supposed sanctity from what they perceive to be secular encroachments. Currently, they are not dictating how we worship, neither are they calling for a ban on Sabbath keeping. What they are simply saying is, hey, you are desecrating the Lord's Day, therefore we want a law to prevent you from doing this. And you and I know that when Satan is up to something sinister, he always starts out looking benign and harmless. This is what the situation is today. Under this present religious order, people who observe the first day of the week as sacred can still be saved in spite of their ignorance or lack of conviction of the Sabbath truth. Faithful Sunday-keeping Christians like William Miller, Martin Luther, John Wycliffe, Husson Jerome, and almost all the reformers between the 13th and 19th century were saved under the first stage of the Sunday agenda. They were all Sunday keepers, but God accepts them just the same. Why God accepts Sunday keepers today is because Sunday observance is not made a test of fellowship. In other words, at present, God does not use Sunday keeping as a basis for determining whether you are in a right relationship with Him or not. But things are going to change in the future, and Sunday observance will not be regarded in the same way as it is today. Under the second stage of the Sunday law agenda, the world will be transformed into a new religious culture, and that is what I am going to be talking about throughout the rest of this video. As Adventist prophecy students, we are known for propagating the idea that Sunday observance will be the mark of the beast, but it is not the mark of the beast today. But while I will not question the soundness of this view on end-time prophecy, there are further explaining that needs to be done. For instance, as end-time prophecy students, I don't think we have done the best job of explaining why we assert that Sunday observance will be the mark of the beast, but is not the mark of the beast today. In other words, we don't seem to be very clear as to what will be the defining factor that will make the difference in status between Sunday worship today and Sunday worship during the mark of the beast crisis. Our traditional explanation is that when Sunday laws are enforced worldwide by the United States of America, that is when Sunday keeping will become the mark of the beast. But are we suggesting that Sunday enforcement by America will automatically convert Sunday keeping into an evil institution? Most certainly not. With this explanation, we are in effect suggesting that God will start to reject Sunday keepers for observing the first day of the week simply because America has passed a Sunday law. While we as Adventists will accept this position as our traditional teaching, it just will not make sense to the average man or woman outside our fellowship unless we can tell them why. And this is precisely where the missing link is. Once we find this missing link, it will make a dramatic difference in the way we view end-time prophecy in general, and the Sunday issue in particular. When we consider the fact that God is still saving people who have opted for membership in Sunday-keeping churches, when we consider the fact that God is still saving Sunday keepers despite the existence of Sunday laws in many countries all over the world, how will a worldwide Sunday law passed by the United States of America make a difference in the way God relates to Sunday keepers? The issue is clearly more than about what America will do. In order to fulfill the specification of a grievous offense, obeying the Sunday law will have to be an act that will prove detrimental to our relationship with God. Since Sunday keepers became Christians by accepting Christ, the only way to endanger their soul is by getting them to give up their allegiance to Christ. Satan knows that genuine God-fearing Sunday keepers are just as opposed to his kingdom, just like every other sincere, true-hearted Sabbath Christian. Therefore, the devil will not sit placidly by and think that because he gets the vast majority to honor Sunday in place of the Sabbath, he has them all in his corner. Nothing like that. the devil will have to do something more to make Sunday worship an evil institution that attracts the frown of God and make its adherents the object of his wrath. The only factor that will make this possible is the introduction of a new brand of religion that will entice Christians into surrendering their loyalty to God. There are 4 distinct clues, both within and outside the scriptures, that exposes the national Sunday law as the facilitator of an impending global religious culture of outright idolatry and devil worship. I list them as follows. 1. The real meaning of the Sabbath. 2. The origin of Sunday observance. 3. The change in the 10 commandments. And 4. The worship of the beast. I am going to elaborate on each throughout the rest of this video. Clue number 1. The real meaning of the Sabbath. For the true child of God who obeys his commandments, there is no real fellowship like Sabbath fellowship. The prophet Isaiah has captured the essence of worshipping the Father and his holy day in the following declaration. Quote, "If thou turn away thy foot from the Sabbath, from doing thy pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight, the holy of the Lord, honorable, and shall honor him, not doing thine own ways, nor finding thine own pleasure, nor speaking thine own words, then shalt thou delight thyself in the Lord, and I will cause thee to ride upon the high places of the earth, and feed thee with the heritage of Jacob thy father, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken it." End of quote. This is taken from Isaiah 58, verses 13 and 14. The Sabbath is a day when we spend quality time with God, a fellowship we could not have had on weekdays because of the daily routine that our work schedule demands. Therefore, it should be a day to which we look forward every week, an entire 24-hour period of time in which we can truly delight ourselves in the Lord, free of all worldly considerations. Most of the contacts between us and God that contributes to Christian growth will undoubtedly come from the time we spend with Him on the Sabbath, because that's the only day in any given week on which most of our time is spent in worship. The special blessing that the Lord has promised to His children who fellowship with Him on His holy Sabbath is not something that Satan wants us to enjoy. It is for this reason why he sets up a counterfeit Sabbath to rival the true. But this contending day of worship is not just to get people to substitute the Sabbath and lose out on its blessings, but also to substitute the God who created it. The devil knows that merely getting Christians to keep Sunday instead of the Sabbath will not necessarily redound to his benefit, but getting them to disregard the Lord of the Sabbath certainly will. Thus, a new religious order will have to be introduced that is designed to supplant both the Sabbath and its creator, while exalting Sunday as the Lord's day. Every Christian will then be forced to make a decision whether to worship Jehovah and honor His holy day, or align themselves to the new religious order and keep Sunday. Clue number 2. The origin of Sunday observance. Just about every Sabbath keeper, I hope, should be able to tell you of the origin of Sunday observance. Yes, it was a day that was dedicated to the sun god Mithra, a Persian deity that was later accepted into the Roman pagan culture. In fact, the very Lord's Day designation is not of Christian origin. It was first used by pagans in reference to Lord Mithra, but was later introduced into Christianity in reference to Christ. The introduction of this venerable day of the sun into the Christian culture started with an initiative by Emperor Constantine, who was the first to enact a Sunday law. In his attempt to stem the inroads that Christianity was making into the ranks of paganism, this wily emperor resorted to diplomacy. He saw that the more the Christians were persecuted and martyred, the more they sprang up and multiplied. At that time, Christianity was solely a Sabbath-keeping culture. So what Constantine did was to secure a compromise from the Gentile Christians who were prepared to partially go back to their pagan roots for the sake of peace. Because the unbelieving Jews were known for their disrupting activities, Emperor Constantine used their bad reputation to present the faithful Jewish Christians in a somewhat unattractive light. As a result, the Gentile believers gradually disassociated themselves from their more experienced post-apostolic Jewish brethren. Having accomplished the objective of securing a separation between the Jewish and Gentile Christians, the next step is to form a separate religion from the one started by the apostles. That this was indeed the strategy is quite evident in the following remarks. Quote, "Let us then have nothing in common with the most hostile rabble of the Jews." End of quote. And this is taken from Boyle's Historical View of the Council of Nicaea, page 52. The result of separating from the apostolic Jewish teaching was the introduction of a new religious philosophy under the auspices of the Roman papacy. In order to further entice the Gentile Christians away from the obligation of the Sabbath, Rome began to represent the seventh-day Sabbath as a mere relic of Judaism, while making Sunday keeping synonymous with Christianity. Thus the following edict was issued. Quote, "Christians shall not Judaize," meaning keep the Sabbath, "and be idle on Saturday, but shall work on that day. But the Lord's day, Sunday, they shall especially honor, and being Christians, shall if possible do no work on that day. If, however, they are found Judaizing, they shall be shut out from Christ." End of quote. This is taken from A History of the Councils of the Church by Charles J. Heffel, Volume 2, page 316. Have you ever wondered why Satan chose to introduce a day of worship into Christianity that is of pagan origin? Do you think his objective is merely to get Christians to substitute the Sabbath? No, no, no. From day one, it was Satan's studied aim to not only lead the Christian world to disregard the Sabbath of the Lord, but also the Lord of the Sabbath. The agenda to remove the Most High from his place and introduce an idolatrous religious culture is the only possible explanation for this. Clue number 3. The change of the 10 Commandments. You know, very often I hear a lot of talk about how Rome corrupted the 10 Commandments by changing the Sabbath, as if that was the only commandment of the Decalogue that was tampered with. Well, let me remind you, Rome's attempt to change the laws of God did not only affect the 4th commandment, but the 2nd commandment as well. And do you remember which commandment is that? I bet you do. Here it is. Quote, "Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image, or any likeness of anything that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate me, and shewing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments." End of quote. This is taken from Exodus 20:4-6. The attempt to remove this commandment from the Decalogue carries the same agenda that inspired the change in the Sabbath commandment. If we cannot see the clear objective behind the removal of the 2nd commandment, frankly, we are fast asleep in a rumbar. A new commandment that no longer prohibits image worship while sanctioning a day of worship once dedicated to the Sun God? Excuse me. It is not difficult to see that in tampering with the 10 Commandments, Satan has laid the foundation well in advance for the introduction of a new religious order. While the change of the Sabbath obliterates the memory of God's creative and redemptive work from the human minds, the removal of the 2nd commandment sets the stage for the removal of the Creator himself. Can't you see that? The conspiracy to remove the Lord of the Sabbath from our worship services will be realized during the Mark of the Beast crisis. Clue number 4. The worship of the beast. This is where the world will come to judgment. This is where every Christian will come face to face with the eternal choice. The choice as to whether to give homage to the beast or remain loyal to Jehovah. The way in which we usually explain what it means to worship the beast does not provide adequate enlightenment to the man in the street who is not familiar with our unique position on Bible prophecy. In explaining the biblical reference to the worship of the beast, we try to remove it from its obvious meaning, for which there is no scriptural warrant, to suggest that the world will worship the beast merely by obeying a Sunday law. While there is some truth to that statement, Again, we fail to properly differentiate between Sunday keeping today and Sunday keeping during the mark of the beast crisis. We seem to be implying that Sunday keeping will suddenly become this evil institution when it becomes a big issue in the last days, but we fail to adequately explain how will Sunday becoming a big issue makes it such a grievous offense that it will attract the wrath of God upon its adherents. The fact is, people are not going to be punished with the 7 last plagues merely because they choose to worship on the wrong day. If that were the case, many would have been punished already, because Sunday worship would be just as offensive to God today as it will be in the future. But the reason why people are going to be punished with the wrath of God, fire and brimstone, is because they have made their decision to give their homage to the beast instead of to the God of heaven. And what will make the difference? The world will embrace a new religious culture of outright idolatry and devil worship. Thus the world will be divided into 2 camps, the worshippers of the beast and the worshippers of Jehovah. And by the way, when I talk about the world worshipping the beast, I am not merely suggesting that the world will obey the Sunday law. I am talking about worship in every sense of the word. To put it plainly, the vast majority of the world's inhabitants will literally give their homage to the beast in the same way we worship God today. When we see the Sunday issue in light of a new religious culture, most of the things that we believe about the mark of the beast that were not so clear will begin to make a lot more sense. You will see that the mark of the beast issue in the last days is not going to be a quibble over a day, but rather the facing of a choice over whether you remain a spiritual Israelite or become a spiritual heathen. It is indeed going to be an end-time warfare between the worshippers of the beast and the worshippers of God. And this is how the Lord will gather his people into one fold, and once again Christianity will become the bulwark Sabbath-keeping culture it once was. I know that as an Adventist watching this video, you have never heard anything like this before. Yes, you are hearing for the first time about how the world will be converted to a heathen society just before the second coming of Christ. Let me tell you something. I think we as Sabbath keepers need to get a better appreciation of the true meaning of Sabbath observance. Too often we treat God's holy day as a mere means of social interaction instead of a day of fellowship with our Heavenly Father. When this prophecy begins to unfold, it will not be a scenario that we can withstand simply by being a good Sabbath keeper or a faithful church member in good and regular standing. The only way the true saints of God will overcome the new religious order is by having a quality relationship with the Lord of the Sabbath. These 4 clues that I put forward may not be adequate to prove to you that the world will go pagan in the last days. I just made mention of them because I know they are issues with which we are all well familiar as students of the prophetic word. However, if you want to see irrefutable proof that in the last days the world will descend into an idolatrous religious culture, just search the scriptures. It was when I decided to undertake a marathon prophecy research on Revelation 13 that I realized to my astonishment that this new religious order was prophesied in so many places in the Bible, yet almost none of us are aware of it. From the testimonies of Moses and David to the prophetic utterances of Isaiah, Jeremiah, and almost all the minor prophets, the pages of scriptures are rattling with predictions about the conversion of the world to a heathen culture. What we read in Revelation 13 is actually a rehash of what other prophets have already forecasted, with more details and placed within a narrative framework. It is for this reason that I have put together an end-time prophecy study package that deals specifically with this last day phenomenon. It covers end-time issues such as the mark of the beast, the 144,000, the rapture, the fall of Babylon, the 7 trumpets, the 7 seals, the 3 angels' message, and much more. Download the entire End Time Prophecy e-course package by clicking on the link below. It is www.prophecyecourse.com. I am Steve Sterling. Thanks for watching.